Hi, I'm Chifonne. Welcome back to our final day journeying through Psalm 23. I hope this series has been a blessing for you and has been encouraging. It has been a wonderful reminder for me as well of what it looks like to be shepherded by Jesus. And today, our final day, we're going to take a look at Psalm 23, verse 6, which says, "Surely your goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Can I just say right off the top how much I love that word, surely? You know, the last few years, we have heard nothing but words like unprecedented and uncertain. And it's so true. There's been so much in the last few years in our world that truly was unprecedented and uncertain. But the Bible does give us some certain certainties, some things that we can be truly sure of. And this is one of them. Surely the goodness and mercy of the Lord will follow you all the days of your life, and you will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. If I were to reword that to make it more personal, I would say I am 100% confident that there is nothing I could do to escape the goodness and mercy of God. Like, think of it as something just following you right on your heels. You can't get away from it. No matter where you turn, there it is, the goodness and mercy of God, His amazing love for you. We know that the goodness and the mercy of God are present and are part of our lives, but sometimes it's hard to see it, isn't it? Sometimes we face circumstances where maybe we're not so aware of God's goodness and mercy. And in those times, we have to come back to the Word of God, right? And remind ourselves of the truth. I love Psalm 27:13. It just reinforces this idea. It says, "I will remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord here in the land of the living." There are those times that we come to where we don't see the goodness right in front of our eyes, but we can still be confident that it is on its way. I want to just give 3 little nuggets or ideas of what to do when it's hard to see God's goodness in front of you. And the first one is what I just started with. Like, don't worry, you will see it. God is so faithful. This is where we talked about this earlier in the series about really knowing the Word of God and allowing our hearts to meditate on the truth of God's character, of who He is, that can be found in the Word. And apart from our feelings or our circumstances, we know that the Word of God is the truth, right? So don't worry, you will see the goodness of the Lord. And maybe you need to just start to talk to your soul. You know, earlier in the series, we mentioned Psalm 103, where David actually speaks to his soul. And this is an idea that we see in many different passages throughout the Bible. And I know for me, there have been many times in my life where I have taken that verse from Psalm 27 and rehearsed it to myself over and over and over again. I remind myself and I tell my soul, I will remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord here in the land of the living. If I showed you journals from years past, I'm not kidding, you would come to times where it is pages of me writing that verse over and over and over again, reminding myself, I will see the goodness of the Lord. I will be confident in this. I know my God. I know who He is, and I know that He will be good. And I can honestly say to you that He always has been. Sometimes it doesn't look the way I expect, but He has always been good and faithful. So begin to speak to your soul. You know, that same verse in Psalm 27 goes on to say, "Be strong, take heart, and wait for the Lord." So sometimes we just have to remind ourselves, don't we? Be strong, take heart, wait for the Lord. He will come through for you. Number 2 is remind yourself of God's faithfulness and His goodness in times past. You know, throughout the Old Testament, we will see these stories of where God does something amazing for His people and they build an altar Or it might also be called an Ebenezer. It's an altar of remembrance. And what it was is a visual representation, a visual reminder of who God is and what he has done, so that generations to come could look at that altar and be reminded, this is who God is, and this is what he has done for our family and in our lives. Sometimes we have to create these types of altars. Maybe you don't actually build a physical altar, but maybe you keep a journal, or maybe there's little mementos or reminders of ways that God has been faithful to you before. I actually really recommend keeping a journal. And maybe if you don't already have a journal, maybe you can actually start the next time you need that reminder of God's goodness. Why don't you just pull a piece of paper out and begin to remind yourself, where have you seen God be faithful in the past? And begin to write it down. And I can almost guarantee you that if you spend time meditating on the ways that God has provided for you and been good to you and taken care of you and come through for you in times past, it will put fresh wind in your sails to face whatever you're going through today. There is so much faith that is built in us when we retell the story of God's goodness. But also, I know that sometimes that comes with longevity of walking with Christ. Maybe you're a new believer and you have stories of God's goodness, but maybe you feel like you need to draw from other people's stories. Or maybe you've been walking with God your whole life, but you still know there's value in hearing the stories of God's faithfulness through other people as well. This is where sharing testimonies can be so powerful. Being in community, being with other people who love Jesus and have been through times like what you're going through and can recount for you their own stories of God's faithfulness. So I encourage you, ask friends, ask community, ask people from your church, when have you seen God be faithful for you? How has he come through for you? And you will be amazed at the stories that you will hear. The third thing I would say is just cultivating intentionality, being intentional in noticing the goodness of God today. This is something that I have really been working on the past few years because honestly, sometimes in life, there's just so much going on that there's a lot of goodness to be found, but we kind of miss it, don't we? Even in just these little small moments that can be blessings from God and examples of his goodness to us, but it's so easy to miss it. There is an ancient prayer called the Daily Examen, and the main question, the central idea around this, it's to be prayed at the end of the day, and it includes this idea of asking, where did I see or experience God today? And I would even suggest something that I've started to do in the last few years as well, with a little twist of where did I see or experience the goodness of God today? And just to begin to record it, even little things. Sometimes it's like a sweet conversation with an old friend or something really beautiful, the sunset over the water, or just these little moments where when I become aware of them, I feel like a connection with God. As I lean into that moment, I say, God, thank you. Thank you for that beautiful sunset. And it just brings me into this awareness of God's presence with me. We know that he's with us, but sometimes it is easy to lose sight of it, isn't it? The final thing I want to say is what I love about God and what's amazing about his goodness is that it is so present. And it is amazing how, as we cultivate that intentionality and that awareness of really savoring the goodness that we experience from God in our lives, we become more aware of it as it's happening. So the more that we take time to notice and enjoy and savor these moments, the quicker we will be to experience the goodness of God in our future. I want to thank you for taking this time with me, this journey into God's heart as a shepherd. I hope that you'll continue to study this and to experience even more the power of God's shepherding care in your day-to-day life. God bless you.